Hey, what's up everyone? Tim here from Everyday Tactical Vids, and today we're talking about this right here, which is the TOPS Kukuri and the survival kit that I've built into the sheath. So what I want to do is give you a rundown of the scenario that I've built this kit around, and then we're going to show you both the kit and the knife in use. Here's your scenario. You're out in the woods. Maybe you're hiking, maybe you're hunting, maybe you're working on bushcraft skills. And all of a sudden you realize two things. First, you realize that you're lost. And secondly, you realize that the sun is going down quickly and you don't have a lot of daylight left before you have to set up camp. So the idea behind this kit and the Kukri is combined with the knife and with the items in the kit. Can you survive through the night so tomorrow you can get up and either signal for rescue or get yourself out of the woods? Let's talk through the details on the Kukri. 14 inches from end to end, 7.75 inches of blade. Your weight is 22.2 ounces. 1095 is your steel. You have linen micarta handles. You can see there is a lanyard hole that I've added a lanyard to there at the end of the knife, and it does have the bow drill divots on both the right side and the left side of the handle. Here's a real quick look at a TOPS Kukri there on the bottom, and then kind of a classic Kukri up on the top. That one on the top is from India, and you can see, I mean, just the style between the two. The bottom is much more kind of modern, and I really like the style of the TOPS Kukri a lot. I just think it's sleek. It's got kind of a mix of that outdoors, but also a little bit of a kind of a tactical feel to it. The classic Kukri on the top there doesn't have that black traction coating on it, so that's gonna, be a plus and minus depending on, what people like or what people prefer. But just wanted to give you a quick look at these two different Kukris so you could see kind of the evolution over the years of Kukris. When I started doing the research on the TOPS Kukri, I found a great video by a guy named Funky Prepper on YouTube. So I put a link to his video down below. He offered some really great insights when it came to the angle of a Kukri. So here's what he pointed out, and I think this is really helpful when we think about, getting like a machete, a Kukri, some sort of chopping tool like this. So what he said was, as you're chopping, you'll notice that when you come in like this, now I'm chopping, I've actually hit the wood, and the angle of my wrist is quite comfortable. It's not weird, it's not twisted, it's not like this or like this. With a knife, because the knife comes straight out of the handle usually, you would be more like this when you're chopping. Now you could back up and let the knife, float a little bit more freely, but the natural angle of your hand when you have a knife is going to be a little bit stranger as opposed to the Kukri because of the bend and the angle of the blade and the bend of the knife coming off of the handle. It's just going to be a lot more comfortable for chopping. So keep that in mind when you think about getting something that you're going to use aggressively for chopping, not just bushcraft skills with your basic smaller bushcraft knife. That's something you want to consider. I thought that was a really helpful insight as I started thinking about this knife and how it could be effectively used. Let's talk through the sheath quickly here. It is ballistic nylon. You can see there is a pouch on the front where I've got a lot of that gear stored. It does have two hook and loop closures up there that are going to keep your Kukri nice and secure so it's not going to fall out. There's a belt loop here. Down here on the bottom we do have some cordage so you can wrap it around your leg so it won't move all over the place when you have it running on your belt. Flipping it over here, you can see I put some gear on the back. I'll talk about that in a second. We do have this long piece of webbing so you can attach it to a pack if you wanted to do that. And overall, I mean, it's nothing spectacular as far as a sheath, but it's gonna do the job. And I like the fact that it's big enough to hold the Kukri, but you're getting a little extra storage space here as well, so that you can put some gear in there for a kit exactly like I'm talking about. You could certainly put an Altoids tin in there as well if you want to do that. So you could build an Altoids tin kit and then put it inside this pocket, and then even fit a couple other additional items into the pocket. It does come with a TOPS whistle, which was attached to this piece of cordage, which was kind of hanging down below the bottom of the sheath. I took it off just to get it out of the way, but that is something that will be included in this kit. So what have I included in my kit? Well, for me, I've got a couple basics based on my experience and where I live. So the first thing you'll see when I open this up is I've got a Sawyer filter in here. Now, I chose this over some other options because it's very small and lightweight. And I found that even though a lot of people want to think about, how am I going to hunt in a scenario when I'm lost in the woods or survival situation, whatever it is, water is the thing that ends up just rocking your world if you become dehydrated. So I did like a 36-hour overnight, and I found myself, even in those 36 hours when I didn't have enough water, it really affected me. So water is going to be a huge thing that you want to make sure you can deal with in a survival scenario. Now, could I get through a night without water? Absolutely. But the next day, if I'm going to be hiking or doing any kind of activity, I want to have a way I can get clean water. So I've got this Sawyer water filter. In addition to the filter, I put a large heavy-duty plastic bag in here. And the reason is, let's say I find a good water source, but It's not close to where I actually, I'm staying, or it's on the way somewhere and I've got a long way to hike. Now I've got a way I can actually carry some water. Even if I just fill this with water and carry it in my hand, I can still drink it out of the bag with the Sawyer filter, and now I've got water basically on the go. Ideally, you'd have something you could boil water in, but that pocket is just so small, that's not really going to be an option. Next up, we have a very small light. It's the Olight S1 baton. This takes one CR123 battery, and I got this because it is so lightweight and yet it gives a lot of light. You could clip this onto a hat if you were wearing a baseball hat. It's got a variety of different settings. I like this light because it's small, it's lightweight, gives a lot of output, and it takes a CR123, which is not going to be nearly as affected as your standard alkaline battery by the cold. And so that's a big deal if you're out, especially in New Hampshire where it's cold a lot of the year. Next up here we have kind of the ultimate bag of goodies. In this bag you'll see I've got a lighter, I've got some stormproof matches, I've got down in here basically some starter that you would use for like getting a charcoal grill going if you were using your standard charcoal as opposed to propane. So a very flammable substance. Redundancy. I want to have a lot of options for making fire, because for me in New Hampshire, the most challenging situation when you're in the woods for most of the time during the year is going to be the temperature, the cold. So I've got an option to make a fire now, which is a huge deal if you're going to be in the woods overnight without, a sleeping bag and lots of gear to keep you warm. So I've got that, and then the other thing you can see here is your standard astronaut blanket. That's going to be something that you can either keep accessible so you can wrap it around yourself, or you can set it up inside of some sort of shelter so that you can be reflecting heat from the fire back to you. On the back you can see I have a bunch of cordage options. I have about 70 feet of paracord here, and then I've got paracord here, which is linked to a magnesium block with a fire steel. So that's a third way to start fire. I've got a striker that's right here built into the cordage, so I'm not going to lose the striker. I've got extra cordage here, I've got the magnesium if it's really wet out, and I have the fire steel as well. Now in addition to that, I do have a bunch of extra cordage that goes down here that was basically built into the sheath. Again, this is to be used for wrapping this around your legs so the sheath doesn't move all over the place. But basically this is just an additional piece of cordage that I might be able to use. Well, unfortunately my battery on my camera died, so I had to head out, charge it up, but I'm back here now to finish out our review, talking about the TOPS Kukuri and also the kit that I've built into the sheath. So what I'm going to do now is actually build my setup, my shelter, my fire pit, really the area I'd be staying overnight if I was, stuck out and like, man, I got an hour, 45 minutes left, something to get my shelter up to spend the night out in the New Hampshire woods. So what I'm going to do, you see these two trees right behind me here, one right there, one right there. I'm basically going to put a low cross beam where my shelter, that'll kind of be the top of my shelter, and then I'll put some branches back, and then I'll cover it, and we'll basically show you how I'm going to do this. I'll show you some of the different pieces using the Kukri, and then we'll actually show you what constructing the shelter looks like as well. Let's get into it. All right, we're going to start off here by actually getting our cross beam for the shelter. I did want to mention real quick that I have my TOPS whistle that's now attached to this piece of paracord at the bottom of the sheath. So that's a great option to have that connected to your sheath, obviously, because now you've got a signaling device. If you were injured, you want to get somebody's attention, you get this for it. All right, so I've got my paracord, I've got my cross beam, and what we'll do is we'll set the cross beam up. One key thing to remember is that you don't want to set it up real high. You don't need to be able to walk around in your shelter. It's just a place where you're going to basically hunker down for the night. So you want to keep it low enough that you can sit comfortably. You don't have to be bent over, but at the same time, if you put it up too high, that heat from the fire is just going to be dissipating and floating all over the place as opposed to warming up your shelter. Okay, we got our cross beam. Now we're gonna put a couple beams, just maybe two down the back, and then we're gonna actually attach the astronaut blanket up underneath there. So I've decided, rather than wrapping it around myself, I'm gonna put it on the underside of my roof That way it's giving me a little protection if there is rain, and I'll put some more leaves and things like that, but it'll give me a little protection from the rain if the rain falls down, and also be reflecting that heat from over my head and then kind of on my back when once the fire's going. Here's a look at the shelter from the front. You can see the crossbeam here. That's the one I just cut down with the Kukri, and this one was actually just dead on the ground. So just to show you, running them down the back like so. And now we're gonna mount the astronaut blanket kind of up underneath, and we'll show you how that happens. Here's my astronaut blanket. The reason I'm gonna use it as part of the roof as opposed to wrapping it around me is that I find, the more you move, you can rip these things really easily. But if I get it stable and in place, let's get that mosquito out of here. If I get it stable and in place, it's less likely to rip and then give me other issues. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put it up against this tree and then put that beam over against it to kind of pin it in place, and then put it across this way. Now instead of doing it lengthwise, I'm actually gonna do it, there's gonna be some draping down the side, up over the top, and then draping down the side. That way, heat from my fire when it comes in can bounce off the walls and the roof to come back and heat me up. So let's show you what that looks like, and then we're gonna put a bunch of branches and other things to really fill out, I would say, the roof here. So as you can see, if I just left it like this thing would blow all over the place. So let's get some stuff on top of this now. So we're looking at it here with kind of the rough skeleton on the top there. Again, if I had lots of time, I'd be like, okay, let's make this very sleek and slick and everything that I want it to be for a long-term shelter. But this is like, sun is going down, got to make it happen quickly. So I've got a rough skeleton to at least keep that astronaut blanket from floating away. Now we're going to get some more of a skeleton on top of it, and then throw some leaves on top of it to start building that insulation. The next thing I'm going to do is actually go to working on my fire setup, because I can spend a lot of time on the shelter, but if I get a nice fire going, maybe even heat up some rocks to bring inside my shelter for the night, it's going to make a huge difference. All right, I've been working about probably 15, maybe 20 minutes, just grabbing some leaves and throwing it on there. Let me step out of the way so you can actually see it. So you can see the side, there's still plenty that needs to get filled in there. But again, if this is a nighttime scenario, right now I'm like, sun's going down, and it kind of is a nighttime scenario as the sun starts to go down here in New Hampshire. I'm thinking fire at this point. Yeah, I've got a basic shelter that'll probably get me through the night. Even if it rains a little bit, it'll be uncomfortable, but drier than just being out in the open. Now I'm thinking fire, fire, fire. So let's get to getting some wood set up, and also getting a reflector so we can reflect that heat back into the shelter. Now, believe it or not, as I'm working on this, the rain is starting to come. So we'll see how waterproof this shelter is. But in the meantime, this accentuates the point, fire, fire, fire. So what we're gonna do is actually, we're gonna get two sticks, drive them into the ground, and then basically put logs in between to build a wall so that the heat will reflect off that wall and then back into the shelter. I wanna show you real quick what I did. I took all the gear out of the survival kit that hasn't been used already, other than the knife, and I put it in that plastic bag and in the shelter, so that if it is pouring or it's starting to rain now, it'll stay in a place where it's nice and dry. You can see the gray coloration that has taken over the atmosphere here. Just getting gray, it's getting dark, like it's gonna rain. It started, then it stopped, now it's starting again. We're still working on our reflector for the fire, so we're gonna use the Kukri to sharpen up. We'll use this end here, sharpen up these four ends so we can drive them into the ground a little bit more easily. Should do. And I'll definitely tell you that walking around with this kukri, it definitely does make you feel like you're walking around with a tool, not just a large knife. Get this out of the way. That's probably good. That's two. See how well these ones hold up. These are some very dry pine. Three. Here's number four. There you go. Now I could use probably the spine of the kukri to basically use it as a hammer to drive these stakes in, but I'm just going to use this piece of wood that I found rather than beat up the kukri. So let's put this in place here. And you want to have your reflector and then space for your fire. It's a loud bird. Reflector, space for your fire, and then your shelter. You don't want to have it inside the shelter. Obviously that's too dangerous. So you definitely got to put these back a little bit. One. Two. There's three. There's four. You could see a bunch of pine bark here on the outside of my shelter. Essentially, I was out collecting some materials for the shelter and for the reflector and came across a huge pine tree that was down, took the bark, and I put it on the sides. You could put it on the top as well to keep the rain out if the rain comes, but at this point I thought, let me just try to keep the heat that's going to be going into the shelter over this way from the fire and the fire reflector, keep it in the shelter a little bit more. But again, just as you're out looking for one thing, be aware that other resources might pop up. There's a bunch of logs here that have clearly been cut. You can see this one very even cut at the end. So I'm just going to utilize what's here. We have a bunch of smaller pieces of wood. Some of this is from a time I was actually out here. This big log, I don't know who cut that, but let's work the kukri a little bit and baton some of this wood. My sense is that a lot of it's probably dry enough already, but we'll do it anyhow just to put the kukri through the paces. And yeah, let's do it. I mean, as you can imagine, 1/4 inch thick, 1095, nice big belly. This thing has no problem. That was some pine. This is some maple here, it looks like. So let's baton this and see how that goes. Gotta hit it harder, but still working just great. As you would expect, no problem whatsoever for the kukri. Got some wood. Let's get a little fire started and then we can you know, basically assess what our situation is and continue to gather resources. All right, let's see if we can get a feather stick using the Kukri here, at least some small shavings, I should say. Now I'm choked up a little bit here, but now I'm just using the beginning part of the blade as opposed to that big belly there. And this is some pine. I think that'll certainly start nicely. Certainly very dry, even though the rain is coming. Just save these shavings right there. Get a different angle here. Yeah, get some real nice curls off this thing. There's that. So you can see it definitely, even though it's a big tool, big knife, it's definitely gonna get the work done. All right, so the Kukri does not have a 90-degree spine on the top. This is, I don't know if it's standard for all TOPS knives, but definitely true of some TOPS knives. Not a huge deal, because I do have a striker on the fire steel here. So let's get a fire started. There we go. As you can see, we have our fire going. Let me take you on a little tour around camp now. First thing I want to show you is my bag of goodies. So this was inside the shelter when I got done with my fire steel and magnesium and the striker. I put that in there too so I don't lose it. So I'm just carrying that around with me now. Some wood, definitely not enough wood for the night, but I've got some wood started there, and if I get a nice fire base, then I could certainly just, you know, throughout the night go out and add to that. I always think, you know, when you've got enough wood, probably double or triple it easy, maybe even 4 times as much, because you just go through it so quickly. Some of this is hardwood, a lot of pine though, which is going to burn quickly because that's a softwood. There's our fire. There's our reflector. Here's a look inside the shelter now. And you can see over here on this side, we've got some of that pine, the bark, and then over here, same thing as well. So if I still had some time and a little daylight, I would go out and just improve the shelter a bit, and definitely my first move would be to get more firewood. All right, so let's talk about the knife here. Great. I really liked using this a lot. Again, I didn't feel like I just had a large knife on me. I felt like I really had a tool. And yeah, as you saw, I was able to do some of that fine work to get some of those shavings to get the fire started. Absolutely no concerns about batoning. You know, 1/4 inch thick, 1095 steel. Just feels really sturdy, so I'm not concerned about, you know, it breaking or something like that. Chopping, really effective. I put this lanyard on it, so, you know, I've got control of it, but I could even choke way back on the handle like so and really swing that. And I can adjust this and, you know, make the lanyard tighter or looser depending on what I want. Jimping, felt like it was good. I never felt like it was beating my hand up at all. Felt very comfortable still, but gave me a little extra control. Wasn't making a huge difference, but I do think it's probably better to have that than have nothing right there. And then as you could see, the sheath, I mean, you're able to fit quite a bit of gear into it. I've still got my light if I was here at night. I've got my, I got my water container, my bag. I've got my water filter, the Sawyer water filter, so I can get some water. And I've got my fire going, and I can definitely feel some heat reflecting right here. It's pretty much dying out, but I can still feel the heat reflecting here. My shelter, again, this is not gonna be a long-term shelter for me. It's can I get through the night? Or with the Kukri and the kit I put together in the sheath, I would feel totally comfortable spending the night here, whether it was raining or whatever. Yeah, I felt like I'd be able to get through the night. Maybe not the most comfortable experience, but I would survive so I could move forward the next day and effect self-rescue or get rescued by somebody. TOPS Kukuri, definitely liking this thing liking this thing a lot. I mean, it's as big as a large knife, but I feel like it functions in a more diverse way than a lot of the other large knives that I've used before. So this is getting a thumbs up for me. I mean, I like Tops in general. They just make cool stuff. They make way outside the box stuff that I would, as far as use in the woods, not a lot for me at least. But they also make a lot of things that I'm like, these are really solid knives. So, but this one's gonna get a thumbs up and be recommended to you if you're looking for a kukri with a little bit more of a modern look that's gonna serve as a one-tool option. This is something I would definitely tell you to check out. I want to give a big shout out to Tops. Thanks to Craig and all those people over there who are helping make these videos possible. And as I always say, more videos coming soon. Take care.